Let's make some edible moss. So I baked off this extra cookie, and what we're gonna do is we're gonna crumble it into this bowl. You wanna make sure that you get all the large chunks out of the cookie. So I'm just using my hands here, and we're going to just crumble this up as fine as we can. Now for edible moss, it does take a lot of food gel. We're going to use Wilton brand moss green and a touch of black. For this moss, we are using it in our advanced Halloween cookie set. So I want a darker moss. This works really well for Easter cookies too. I use this a lot at Easter time for those mossy bunny rabbits or like a robin's egg nest, just to put a touch of moss in there. But for this, we're using it for our advanced class. So you can see we're getting this nice and fine. We want this crumbled up as much as we can. And these large chunks, you can just shake the bowl and they'll come up to the top. Now you could either sift these out or, just keep crumbling them up. Okay, I think that's good. And this goes a long way. Like this one cookie, it'll go a really long way when we're decorating our cookies. We'll only use like a fraction of this moss. Okay, so now we want to add in our food color. So this is Wilton Moss Green. And like I said, moss takes a lot of food gel because those cookies, it just soaks up that color. So I'm going to put, a pretty good heaping amount of green in there. And because I want this to be a darker moss, I am going to put a touch of black just to mute that color down a little bit. So here's my black. I highly recommend gloves because this does get super messy. If not, you could even put these cookie crumbs in a Ziploc bag and just mix it up in the Ziploc bag if you don't have gloves. So now what I'm doing is I'm just getting in there and mixing this up, crumbling as I go, just to get that color incorporated into these crumbs. You kind of want to do this with your hand, like get a good handful and just squeeze and rub that color into those cookies, because you can see like a lot of it still has that cookie color. We want to get as much of this colored as we can. Now there's still a lot of moisture in these cookies because it's a freshly baked cookie, so these crumbs are going to clump because of that moisture. See, it can roll up in a ball like that. So we're just going to keep mixing this color in. Now ideally you want to make this a couple days ahead of time, even just a day ahead of time, and after you're done with the moss, lay it out on a cookie pan, in a thin layer, and just let this dry up a little bit. Let some of this moisture evaporate out of the cookie. And then this way, when you're going to put it on your cookie, it's more of a powder instead of, clumped up cookie. This is ready to use. You can use it. You don't have to do that. Just make sure that it's really nice and crumbled and not to squeeze it too hard when you're adding it to the cookie so that it doesn't clump up. So this is pretty well incorporated here. I'm happy with this color. There's always going to be that little bit of cookie showing through. If you don't like that, just put a little bit more food gel in there and just keep doing this process of just mixing and crumbling. So here's our moss. Okay, and I have a plate right here lined with a paper towel. And I'm just going to shake this moss out onto the paper towel and let that paper towel absorb some of that moisture. I'm going to lay this out in a thin layer and just let that dry a little bit before I decorate my cookies. Okay, and there's our edible moss.